And that topic is how to operate in a world where prospects don't answer their phone. And this is a big topic, and actually probably one of the larger turnouts that we have for one of our webinars, because this is the biggest challenge that a salesperson faces, really, in my opinion, right? Because if you think about it, if you have the best product in the world, let's say it does the best thing, it's priced the best, you're the best salesperson, you have the best script, and you're ready to go, right? But if you can't get someone on the phone, what can you do? I mean, how can you talk about and close that sale? And the reality is that prospects just simply seem to not ever answer their phone. It's worse today than it was 20 years ago for sure. And there's a few reasons for that. One is, well, technology has changed. People communicate different ways, with email, caller ID, all sorts of different things. But one thing that you should keep in mind when you picture the prospect that you're calling, one thing you need to realize, and most likely you're calling at a decision maker level. And a decision maker, if you've ever been in a decision maker role, or if you probably worked for a decision maker at least, think about what their day looks like. They might be in meetings most of the day. So when you're calling this person and they're not answering their phone, you probably think that they're ignoring you. But the reality is that there's just nobody at their desk. They're in a conference room making decisions, right? Because they're a decision maker. So you need to picture this. I mean, it's not crazy for someone to have meeting after meeting after meeting and barely be at their desk. And this is what is happening when you're calling and the phone's ringing and nobody's there. A lot of the time. And some of the time when they are at their desk, they're just getting out of a meeting, and they're just not answering the call because they're catching up from everything they missed when they were making calls. So you got to keep that in mind. And that factors into not only your mental attitude of keeping your head up and keeping going, but also it's going to play a role in what we're going to show you in terms of how you should keep calling them. So you need to keep that in mind. And a lot of times they don't answer the phone, so the calls go to voicemail. They might have their phone always routed to a gatekeeper, especially if you're calling at an executive level. So again, actually getting back to that mental mindset, right? You need to keep in mind that this is okay. This is the world we live in. You can spend as much as 80% of your time just not getting a hold of anybody. In other words, if you sit there and you make call after call for 1 hour, the majority of that hour is spent without talking to a single person or maybe a gatekeeper. And when you experience that, you might feel like, geez, I'm wasting my time. And the reality is you're not wasting your time. That's just what you have to do. You have to spend those 55 minutes talking to nobody in order to get to the 5 minutes where you're talking to somebody. It's just the grinding activity that has to be done. And if you don't have time to do it or you don't want to do it, hire someone else, outsource that function to another organization. But that's just what has to be done. I mean, you can either say people don't answer their phone and cold calling doesn't work and we're not going to do it, which I don't agree with, or you put in the 55 minutes to get to the 5 or 10 minutes where you're really engaged in interacting with someone. And by the way, when you actually get into that 5 minutes where you have someone on the phone, you better execute very sharply, right? Because it took you 55 minutes to get there. The other thing that I would want you to keep in mind is you're going to, in those 55 minutes where you're not talking to anybody, try to take a small step forward with each activity, right? So whether it's sending an email, leaving a voicemail, talking to a gatekeeper, try to take a small step forward. Let me give you an example. If you talk to a gatekeeper and you only have the title of the person you're trying to reach, and you get the person's name from the gatekeeper, and then you get routed to their voicemail, and then you hang up, let's say, you got something out of that call. You now have that person's name, and you can put that name in the CRM or whatever. And now when you call back Instead of asking for the title, you're asking for the name. That is a small step forward. So that's something that you want to be doing along the way. But we're not really going to talk too much about that. We're going to talk about here today, what can you do to deal with people not ever answering their phone? And like I said, you have two choices at this very moment or any day, which is I'm not going to make any calls because nobody's going to answer the phone anyways, or you can strategically take steps to mitigate that challenge. And that's what we're going to show you here today. And there's really two key components. One is multi-touch, which is using a lot of different ways to communicate and to try to get in. You've heard that word multi-touch a lot. By the way, you're going to hear stuff here today that you might have heard before you're already doing. My recommendation is be patient. Stay with me for the stuff that you're already doing, because we might show you something that you're not doing. And you're likely to going to be able to take 2 or 3 things away from today that you can implement immediately, tomorrow, this afternoon, when you're prospecting. So it starts with a multi-touch. We're going to go through that. But then it also deals with the persistence of what you do with that multi-touch, right? I mean, if you make one phone call, send one email, and then make another call again, and you say, well, I can't get a hold of this person, you're lacking persistence there. So yes, you're doing the some pieces of the multi-touch, but it's really that persistence, and we're going to talk to you about some clear things you can do there. So let's dive right in. Multi-touch. So starting with the phone, okay. What you do on the phone when you actually have someone that answers the phone is a whole nother subject. By the way, we have a lot of content there here at Sales Scripter, so be sure to go to our YouTube channel and look at some of our videos on what to say and ask when you're on the phone with someone. But right here, we're talking about what to do with the phone when nobody's answering, right? So one thing is increase your attempts. And I can tell you most likely you're not calling enough. There might be somebody on this webinar that is calling too much, actually, but don't worry about that. Don't worry about calling too much, because most likely you're not calling enough. And we're going to show you actually a structure to how many times you should call towards the end of this presentation, so stick around for that. The other thing that I want to keep you in mind is, and it's written here, it says, don't be a mile wide and an inch deep. And I started thinking about this when I would have cold callers calling on a campaign, and they would be calling a long list of prospects. And they would make like one pass at each prospect, and they would just keep going down the list. And so they would make a lot of calls, a lot of dials to a lot of people, but they were only making one pass, if only 2, right? So what they were doing was they were going a mile wide and only an inch deep. And what I realized was that's not good. What you want is you want a tighter focus on less prospects, meaning you'd rather be an inch wide and a mile deep. Actually, it wouldn't be exactly the flip-flop, but you want to be less wide. So and let me give you an exact example. If I'm giving a list of leads to somebody, I would rather give them 50 contacts to prospect to instead of 500 contacts. And I want them to just continue to make pass after pass after pass on that and drill into those 50 contacts. And once you've gone through all those, then I'll give you some more. But you're going to improve your connect rate when you have that tighter focus. So just stay more focused instead of being spread real thin. Try to get the direct dial. A lot of times you might have a main company phone number, right? So if you get a contact's direct dial through internet searching or contact databases or from the gatekeeper, having a direct dial could improve your ability to get the prospect to answer the phone. But you can also try it the exact opposite way. Let's say you have the direct dial and you're calling someone and you can't ever get a hold of them. You might want to try not using the direct dial. Maybe they know your number or they see your company name come up or whatever. And sometimes when you call the switchboard and then you get routed to them, the phone number displays differently on their internal caller ID display, and so it's something to try. I mean, listen, I mean, what we're going to give you here today is a lot of different stuff to try, and you can take some of these pieces and apply them and see if they help you. One other thing to try is to try adjusting your call hours. So if you're calling, especially at an executive level, you might want to try to avoid the gatekeeper, and so that can often be early in the morning. So like a gatekeeper often gets in there maybe between 8 and 8:30. So try calling before that, 7 to 8. And believe it or not, executives usually get into the office extremely early, sometimes before that. And so you can get them on the phone. Try 12 to 1, the lunch hour. And that's also a time when the gatekeeper often goes to lunch. And if the phone's being routed, your prospect might answer their phone. And even if they don't do the gatekeeper routing thing, they just might be at their desk eating, not in a meeting. Or try 5 to 6. I'm not saying that only prospect at these hours, but these are some good hours to mix in to your prospecting to try to improve getting a hold of certain people that might be elusive. What I would also say is avoid, if you're going to avoid any times of the day, avoid 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. If you've ever had someone schedule a meeting with you, or think about when you've scheduled a meeting with someone else, think about the two times that always pop in your head or get mentioned when someone says, yeah, what time do you want to meet? And the first time that people say is, oh, how about 10 o'clock? 10 o'clock next Tuesday, right? 10 o'clock and 2 are going to be the most likely times that your prospects are in meetings and away from their desk. So if you agree with that, don't call at those times. Then you also want to use something to track the calls that you're making in terms of how many times you've called somebody and when your callback should be made. So use a CRM with callback reminders, pretty standard stuff there. Voicemail. If you're on this webinar, you experience getting voicemail a lot when you're doing prospecting, right? Well, there are some clear things to do and not do with voicemail, and I would say that most salespeople probably don't use voicemail effectively. We actually have a training module on using voicemail, creating a voicemail script that is effective, but a couple key things. One is don't use voicemail to try to sell. It's not enough time to build interest, and don't try to have a goal of your voicemail to get the prospect to call you back. The prospect that you're leaving the voicemail for, especially if you're cold calling, right? If you're doing warm calling, you could ask the prospect to call you back, but decision makers don't return cold calls. If you get a decision maker returning your cold voicemail, you probably should disqualify them from being a decision maker because they must have too much time on their hands. So use the voicemail to educate. So in that 20 to 30 seconds, share some information about how you help, the problems you fix, another client you've helped, not all of those, but one of those things, and use that to educate the prospect and use this as a channel to leave your commercial. What I would also tell you is to have multiple voicemail messages. So I just rattled off a bunch of different things that you should say in your voicemail. Well, take one of those and create different voicemail messages. So if you're going to make multiple passes and leave multiple voicemail messages, leave a different one each time. And then, you never know. I mean, they might all get deleted. I mean, but if someone hears part of them, you're going to be telling a little bit more of your story over those different times. Now, here's a very important thing. Follow up every voicemail with an email. And I do this really regardless who I'm calling. And you do it for a couple reasons. One is this enforces that multi-touch. But what it also does is that they might hear your voicemail, but it's more difficult to call you back than it is to reply to your email. So you're giving the prospect an easier way to respond to you. An email is easier for the prospect to file away and to hang on to your info. And speaking of email, we're going to talk about email in two different ways today. Right now we're talking about prospecting emails. So these are your one-to-one, your personal emails that you send as a business person reaching another business person. And some tips here regarding that. You notice I said business person. do everything you can to not sound like a salesperson in your emails. I get emails every day from salespeople on LinkedIn. I work for this company, we sell this, it does this, do you need this, right? Well, not only am I likely not looking to buy what they have right now, but I may later, but it's just a turnoff. And your prospect will be guarded, and when you start to sound like a salesperson, they're going to shut down. Sound like a business person, and we also have content in our training modules on how to do that and how to create your emails so that you sound better. Now, I've said create emails. What I would recommend to anybody is if you're not using email templates of some sort for your prospecting emails, you're wasting time, or you're not sending enough emails. Because you send the same emails again and again. And here are 3 types of templates that you need to create. A pre-call email. This is an email that you send to someone that you haven't spoken with before. A post-call email. This is an email for someone that maybe you just briefly spoke with. This is like if they say, hey, call me back next week, or send me your info or something. Post voicemail email. I said you got to send an email after every voicemail. Well, we need a template for that. These 3 situations come up again and again, and most likely they're the exact same. You don't need to really change your message all that much. So create an email template that you can just copy paste and send these really quickly, and we can help you with that as well. And so not only should you create an email template for these different categories, but you should create multiple email templates. So, because I mentioned to you have multiple voicemail messages, well, you should have multiple post voicemail email templates. And you can have multiple pre-call emails and whatnot. I'm here talking about using email, remember, and we're talking about phone prospecting and the prospect not answering the call. You may be thinking, well, I don't have the prospect's email address, so how can I do any of this, right? Well, I don't know if you do this or not, but you can actually guess your prospect's email if you don't have it. You may already have the email, but if you don't, then what you can do is there's actually email checker websites. So do a Google for an email checker tool or email guessing tool, and there's a bunch of them on the internet. And what you can do is you can plug in an email, and the software will tell you whether or not it's a good email address or not. And so what you can do is, if you know the company that you're prospecting into, go figure out what their web address is, take their web address, and then use a different combination of first name dot last name at their web domain web address. You do use first initial last name at then their web address, and do those into the email guessers. And if you really, in about 4 or 5 guesses, you can typically figure out an email for your prospects, and then you can add this other step into your multi-touch approach. Physical mail. You know what? I saw a cartoon. I was looking for it on the internet when I was preparing this slide, but there was, and I'll try to recreate it, but there was a cartoon that I saw that it had somebody, and it said, it was like 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, whatever, and probably 15. It was when AOL first started, right? So maybe 20 years ago. And it said it had somebody like bored with their physical mail, but then it had the logo of AOL, and it said, you got mail, and their eyes were real big and real excited, right? Because they have a ton of physical mail, but they get real excited when they get their email. And then it flashed to today in the cartoon, which it had today tons of email, and somebody being bored because they get all this email, and then their eyes are real big in the next picture they get a physical mail. So it's like the exact opposite, which I don't know if you can picture that or not, but the message there is that your prospects get a ton of email, and you want to be part of that, and you want to be adding to that, but they don't get a whole lot of physical mail. They really don't. If you want to really add a little flair to your multi-touch approach, send a physical letter to your prospect. And you know what? It could actually be almost identical to your pre-call email if you've really written that correctly, or somewhat similar. And if you want to really hit this out of the park, actually handwrite your letter. handwrite a letter to your prospect, and then you got to use good penmanship and make it look nice and whatnot on a nice piece of paper. But there's your letter will probably make it to that person's desk and be opened if it has especially a handwritten envelope. There's actually some services you can look at that will handwrite letters for you, and so you can maybe do a search on the internet to see a company that actually will produce really nice handwritten letters for you. So that can be a nice touch to your multi-touch, no pun intended. Also want to talk about social media, right? And you see a lot in the sales training world today about social selling. And I don't know if I want to, I'm not going to get into really social selling here today, but you can use social media as another piece of your multi-touch. Now, what your multi-touch campaign is really doing is you're trying to surround the prospect, hit them from a lot of different angles, and maybe not hit them all at once from every angle. We'll show you that here later in this presentation. But you want to hit them from multiple angles with multiple messages, and you want to communicate with them at a place and time. You want to eventually find out a place and time and method that they like to communicate with, right? Some people like to talk over the phone. Some people prefer to communicate through email, right? So you're going to go through all these steps, and you're going to hopefully find a way that you can reach them and that you can communicate. And you know what? Social media is a way that people communicate nowadays. So here are some things that you can do on social media, right? So you could reach out and connect to your prospect through social media. You could go look for them on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook. The social media platform that works best for you might depend on the type of business that you're in. These three here are very different: LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. I personally use LinkedIn more than anything, but I operate in a very B2B type of world. B2C might be more Facebook, and Twitter. I think everybody's still kind of figuring out Twitter, but you go look and see if your prospects on Twitter, but and start following them, right? Each one of these has different ways of connecting. There's a couple things you want to do once you connect. One is you want to broadcast. And so what I mean by broadcast is by like doing a status update, publishing, sharing some sort of content. And what you need to picture that doing is, if you can picture like a radio antenna, broadcasting a radio signal, and it's like, and maybe some of the younger audience doesn't even know what I'm talking about there. But those radio waves are sent out, and some of the waves don't land on anybody. Nobody picks them up. But some of the radios that are tuned into that station hear that message. And so that's what you want to be doing on social media, is you want to be broadcasting. What that does is, some people who see your messages especially if you broadcast content that's of value, that is either informational, entertaining, humorous, you can then grab someone's attention and they're reminded of you, right? And so maybe that they've received your email, they haven't answered your call, but you've made a mark and you haven't talked to them yet, but they know who you are, and then they see your update on LinkedIn, and then you're reinforcing and you're reminding them who you are. You should also notice when they post content and like and share their content. That's also a great way to offer value back to them, to remind them that you're out there. You can send direct messages through social media to try to be part of your multi-touch and part of your prospecting. And what I would say to you is, don't try to sell your product through these direct messages, which, if you actually look at our logic with how we recommend you build your pre-call emails, if you use that same logic with your emails, you can use it here with social media, because that's what we say here is, don't sell. I get emails every day through LinkedIn with people trying to sell me something, and they're similar to messages I complained about with email. I work for this company, I sell this, do you need this? There's a better way to go, and there are better ways to send direct messages through social media, and your goal is to start the conversation. So I hope that helps with social media. Now we're going to kind of move into the second half of the component, the plan here, because I shared with you that half of this is multi-touch, the other half is persistence, right? So like I said, if you kind of do a little bit of what I just shared with you, that's not going to get you real far, right? You call the prospect a couple times, you check them out on social media, that's you still can end up in this place where, okay, they're not answering my call. Where you're going to really see where you're going to overcome this challenge of prospects not answering the phone is with persistence. And so let me start by talking about organizational movement. Now, this is a word that I've come up with, right? So I don't know whether this is the perfect label for this concept, but if you Google it, I don't think you're going to find anything out there except for what I've written about it. But organizational movement refers to moving to other parts of the organization when you can't get someone to answer your call, right? So it's not rocket science, but that is something that I think people don't think about. It's like they keep calling the same person over and over, they don't answer their phone, and then they move on to another account. But the reality is that there's other people in that organization that you can talk to. So move, and there's different ways that you can move. And so we have what I refer to as vertical movement. So vertical movement is moving up and down in the department or organization that you're calling into. So if you're calling into the VP of IT, for example, and they're not answering your call, which is very common with the VP of IT. If anybody on this webinar has called into IT, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the entire audience on this webinar is people that call into IT, because IT rarely answers the phone, and the reason why is they get so many calls from other salespeople. Everybody's trying to get to IT, and you can use this logic even in that challenging situation of calling into IT. But let's say we're trying to reach the VP of IT, they don't answer the phone. Okay, well, you know what? We can go above them, right? So let's try to call the CIO. Not an easy task, but but it is an additional person to reach or try to go. We could go below them, call the director of IT. Typically the lower in the organization you go, the easier it is going to be to get people on the phone. So going above doesn't necessarily make it all that easier to connect, but what it does is it gets you calling different people in the organization. That's vertical movement. And we also can do horizontal movement, which is, well, if we're trying to call IT, sure, IT is probably our ultimate buyer, right? But let's say we're trying to sell some software. We can also call operations. Operations is not the person who might sign the contract, but they're impacted tremendously if our IT software or whatever gets implemented. So when we try to call the IT director, or when we can't get into anybody in IT, then we can call into operations, and so that's moving left and right horizontally in the org chart. And what this looks like is it looks like this. Our key person we're trying to reach is the VP of IT, but look at all these other people that we can call when we can't get a hold of the VP of IT. So organizational movement concept there to help you. That's your persistence, right? You're not going to stop with the VP of IT that doesn't answer your phone. You're going to call other people until you get in, okay? Gatekeepers. Now, gatekeepers, we're talking about your prospect not answering the phone here. So gatekeepers may or may not come into play, but a lot of executives route their calls to gatekeepers and only have their gatekeepers answer their calls. So that's how they kind of come into play with your persistence. And there are key things that you can do. I'll tell you this. So there's a difference between a main switchboard person who answers the phone and an executive assistant. An executive assistant is someone who an executive will route their calls to. That and I sometimes it's great to get in to talk to an executive assistant because they're extremely knowledgeable about what's going on, about key initiatives. They have a lot. Sometimes they have a lot of influence. They're completely different than like a switchboard or front desk person. So, but what I would encourage you to do is we actually have a whole module on gatekeepers on YouTube. So check that out. But some concepts, name drop to make the gatekeeper know that you're talking to other people in the organization. You're not a complete outsider. Be prepared for gatekeeper objections. Treat the gatekeeper like a prospect. If you can't get the prospect on the phone, ask the gatekeeper your pre-qualifying questions. You can get additional contacts in the organization. You can use that gatekeeper to help you with your organizational movement to figure out those other people to talk to. The gatekeeper might tell you when the best time to call them is, or the best way to communicate. May even help get you on the calendar. You never know; it's worth a shot. You can maybe get the direct line from the gatekeeper. We talked about email already, and that we refer to that as kind of sales prospecting emails. I want to talk to you just a minute about email drip marketing. So these would be marketing emails, and I think if you've signed up for this webinar, you probably get a few email drip marketing emails from SalesScripter. So you should know what I'm talking about here. But these are emails that drip out to your prospect over a period of time. And so the reason why I bring this up with getting a hold of your prospect or getting them on the phone is you can use drip. Okay, if you call a prospect 10 times over a period of 3 weeks and then you realized they aren't going to answer the phone and you walk away and you never go back, then you might have either left early, or maybe it was the wrong time. Maybe it was 3 months down the road when that prospect should have been called or would have been right for your call. So what email drip marketing does is when you do decide to walk away, or if you're in between your passes that you're reaching out to the prospect on, your emails will be dripping out to this prospect. And so it can improve your ability to get a hold of the prospect to connect in a world where prospects don't answer the phone. So what I would recommend you do is if you don't, and this may actually, if you're a salesperson, some of this may be for your employer, but if you're a business owner or you're a sales manager, you can maybe take some action here. But you should create a list in your email marketing system that is either suspects or prospects, and this is a list that's more tailored for people that you've never really met with or spoken to. And the reason why you kind of want that type of list separated is because you're only going to send these prospects, you're not going to send them any product information, company information, promotions, because you haven't met with them yet, right? By the way, if you haven't realized, a lot of this content is around cold prospecting, so a lot of this doesn't probably apply the same if you're trying to get a hold of a prospect that you sent a proposal to, that they're not answering your call anymore, right? You could maybe use some of this, like the multi-touch or trying to hit them from different angles, but that's kind of a different world. That kind of comes down to, following up with leads and proposals there's different rules that apply. This is about cold prospecting. And so if you're adding a prospect to your email list that you haven't met with, in theory, if they're still kind of cold, you don't want to send them a lot of information about you. You want to send them like tips. You want to send them information of value, right? So again, this would be similar to your activity on social media. It's going to be industry tips or helpful tips, industry news, entertaining emails. So email drip marketing to help you with your persistence. Now, what I want to get into is the call cadence. And call cadence, if you're not familiar with the term, cadence is another word for cadence is rhythm, right? So what is the rhythm that you're going to use in trying to get a hold of this person? And what we're going to do with this call cadence is we're going to pull all those multi-touch methods together and show you a process that you could use call cadence that you could use and put all that together to improve your ability to connect and get prospects to answer the phone. So the starting point is you make your very first cold call, okay? And you can actually start this process also with a pre-call email, and I'll show you that in a second. But you make your cold call, and then you reach a decision, right? You make a call, do they answer the call? Well, if they answer the call, then it's another training subject, and we can help you there, as I said, but then you go through your cold call script, or you go through your call. We definitely have a lot of tips for you there, and it's very important to execute there. But that's really not what we're talking about here today. What we're talking about here is what to do when they don't answer the call. So on your first pass, we're going to recommend to not leave a voicemail message. So you hang up on the very first attempt. Now, what we recommend you do is at this point, you're going to send the pre-call email, which is the pre-call email is one that it says we haven't spoken. It's one designed where you haven't spoken yet. It treats the situation like they don't know who you are. And so you send your pre-call email. Now, after your pre-call email, you're going to pause for 1 day. And I like to use the word pause because what I like you to operate with the mindset of is that I'm continuing to try to get a hold of this person, and I'm only stopping when I push pause. Most people kind of think about it the other way. It's like I'm always like not doing anything, and when am I going to start doing something? So they think of it as like a callback reminder, call a reminder to start doing stuff again. I like to think of it as like, how long am I pausing for until I start to work on this prospect again? So pause for 1 day because you sent the pre-call email. Now you'll notice I did add a second start arrow here. So you could just start with this pre-call email. If you want to just start off with an email instead of calling them, you can just pick up with this call cadence at this step and kind of skip that earlier process. That was round 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through 4 rounds with you on this call cadence. Now round 2 begins when the 1 day pause expires. So 1 day pause expires, and now it's time to call them back. So it's really kind of day 2 in this scenario. So now we call back. Again, did they answer the call? Yes, they did. Okay. Go through the script. No, they didn't. Okay. Leave. Now we're going to leave voicemail number 1. And it says number 1 because we have multiple voicemail messages that we're going to leave. So we leave voicemail number 1. Now, remember what I told you to do. After each voicemail you leave, you're going to need to send an email follow-up. So we actually have an email that's actually paired and aligned with that voicemail message number 1. So post voicemail email number 1. Okay. Now, since we've called them, we left them a voicemail, and we sent them another email, we're going to pause for 7 days. Okay. Now, then we move to round 3. So the 7-day pause expires. Now we're going to call back. Okay. And so it's about a week and a half has gone by since we've begun this process. We call back again. Did they answer the call? Yes. Okay. Go through the script. We know what to do there. No. Okay. Well, now we're going to do something different. And what I'm going to recommend to you is to not leave a voicemail message. Okay. Some people there's a big discussion that you could have on, do I leave a voicemail or do I not leave a voicemail? And what I think the right answer is that you use a mix, and you're only leaving voicemail messages as a way to kind of communicate. You're not really leaving them as a way to get the prospect to call you back. And so during this period, we're not going to leave voicemail messages. And one of the reasons why is when you leave a voicemail message, you have to pause. Because if I call you this morning, I can't call you and leave you. If I call you this morning and I leave you a voicemail message, I can't call you again this afternoon. I'm going to seem like a stalker, right? I'm going to begin to break rapport. So I got to pause for at least a couple days, maybe a week. Depends on your style. But if I call you this morning and you don't answer and I hang up on your voicemail, it's fair game for me to call you back this afternoon. For all I know, you don't know I called, and I'm trying to get a hold of you. I didn't leave you a voicemail, so you don't know to call me back, so I'm going to call you back. And you just operate with that sort of ignorance, that thinking that they don't know that you called, which they probably don't because they were away from their desk in a meeting, right? I mean, there could be the case where they know what your number is and they saw it on caller ID and they ignored it, but we're thinking positively, right? So that's a very negative way to think. The positive way to think is that they were in a meeting, they don't know you called, and you're trying to call them back. So during this period, we're going to call 5 to 10 times over a period of time. And the period of time depends on how many leads you have to work, how busy you are, how much time you're spending prospecting, right? I mean, the 5 to 10 times could be a few days. It could be a week. But what we're going to do is once we get through either 1 week or 5 to 10 call attempts, again, that should all be logged in our CRM, then we're going to leave voicemail number 2, which is a different voicemail message. And we're going to follow up with post voicemail email number 2. Okay, and so then we're going to pause for another 7 days. Okay, and so that kind of begins to close out round 3, but we're not done yet. This second voicemail is a trigger step for us to tell us to do something new. And what we're going to do now is this triggers us to move horizontally or laterally, actually horizontally or vertically, actually is the correct words there, to find a new contact in the organization. So this is where we try to find someone new. We've made a lot of attempts so far to this person. Now we're going to try to find something new. We're going to call their boss. We're going to call their subordinate. We're going to call another department. Once we find a new contact, you can either do that on social media. We might be able to do that from talking to a gatekeeper. But once we find that new contact, what we do is we begin round 1, step 1, with that new contact. And if you were to follow this workflow, it would basically go back 2 slides to the beginning of the process that we started. I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to continue on with what we would do with this contact that we started with, and now we progress to round 4. So the 7-day pause expires. We call back again. Okay, did they answer? Yes. Okay, we go through our script. No. Now we're going to again do the leave 5 to 10, leave voicemail, do not leave voicemail 5 to 10 times. So this is similar to what we did in round 3. Once we reach that sort of sorry, there was a label up there. Once we reach that, after 1 week, 5 to 10 attempts, we leave voicemail number 3, and send post voicemail number 3 email. Now, so let's stop and reflect at what we've done here, right? We've called them a bunch. We've sent them a bunch of emails. We've left them 3 voicemails. I think we've done a lot, right? And this is sort of and by the way, the time frame here would probably be, 3 weeks or so, 3 to 4 weeks that you've been working on this lead. Now, this is where you could maybe potentially close this prospect as either not. I wouldn't close them as not interested because you don't know that. You might want to close the lead in your system or process as just someone that you're actively working. Now, here's where we bring in the email drip campaign, right? We have their email address, so let's add them to our email drip campaign where they're maybe going to get an email from us. I mean, if you're on my email drip campaign, you probably get a couple emails a week, depending on which list you're on. So you're not going to put this person on a list that they get an email every other day, right? That's where you put your warm leads. You put these prospects on a list where they might get 1 to 2 emails a month, maybe something like that, because they still don't know who you are. So that email drip is going to pick up where this call cadence leaves off. And that's kind of really there's one more topic I'm going to talk to you about real quickly, but that's sort of that's bringing everything together. Now, there's nothing revolutionary in there what I showed you. We're talking about making calls, we're talking about leaving voicemails, hanging up, sending emails, whatever, right? There's nothing crazy. It's what I'm sharing with you is a process that you can apply. And that process, not only does it provide you with more structure, but it provides you with more persistence. And that's really something that you need because you got to, let me give you an example. My insurance company tried to get a hold of me to talk to me about my auto insurance. I mean, I'm a current customer of they're not cold calling me. I know who they are. And they must have called me I don't know. They called me a bunch, right? And I never answered their call. I never returned their voicemail because I'm busy. I'm sure you can relate to that in your own life. You just have to be persistent. I mean, like I said, if you're calling them 2 or 3 times and you're saying these people are impossible to get a hold of, you're not doing it enough. So that's the call cadence. The last thing I want to share with you is content marketing. This is one of those topics, again, that is more for the business owner or the manager or maybe somebody in marketing. But this is the last sort of icing on the cake, which content marketing is about creating content and broadcasting it out. You remember me talking about broadcasting on social media. So it's about creating that content, though. So it could be anything from creating blog posts, ebooks, white papers, press releases, videos, and all this content should be information of value. So it should be informational. So it's a blog post not on, oh, here's the new feature we released. It's a blog post on, here are 3 ways to get better at doing this. And that should be related to the product that you offer, maybe. And so producing this content, and you can deliver this content through your website, through your blog post, through social media. This content that your company creates is what your salesperson could be broadcasting on social media. So is this a way to get the prospect to answer the phone? No. But when you connect with the prospect through social media, and when you're sending emails, this is a way to continue to augment those calls that are going unanswered. And so it's a way to improve the salesperson's and the company's ability to connect and to get a hold of prospects. So that is everything that I want to share with you today. We got about 10 minutes left, so right on time. Let me just share you a little information about SalesScripter, because SalesScripter can help you with what I went through, and then I'll flip over to see what questions we have, and we can go through those. So real quick, SalesScripter, if you're not familiar with it, it is a web-based application that it's going to help you to build your messaging, right? So in that call cadence, we had calls where we might have the prospect answer the call. We need to go through a call script. So SalesScripter will basically create, what it does is it'll ask you questions about your situation, and it'll use, for example, what do you sell? How does what you sell help? What problems do you help to fix? What questions should be asked to see if those problems exist? And once you have that, it can produce a cold call script, pre-call, post-call, and post-voicemail emails, voicemail scripts, objection responses. So I show you this because if you like that call cadence, well, if you don't use something like SalesScripter, it might be a bit difficult to think about what am I going to say if they answer, or what am I going to say on their voicemail, or what am I going to send them in their emails. SalesScripter will take care of all that for you. So check it out. We'll give you tools to use when you're making your calls. So here are some steps you can go through if you want more help. If you like anything you've heard. One is go to our YouTube channel. All of our webinars, tons of videos are on our YouTube channel. You can do a search for SalesScripter on YouTube and you'll come across us. There's over 130 videos on there. We have a whole sales training program on there, Sales Prospecting 101. Subscribe. Every time I try to release a new video every couple days to the YouTube channel. Get one of our books. So we have 5 ebooks on our website. I talked about email drip marketing on this webinar. There's actually a book on email drip marketing. And so if you were more curious about that, I've actually written a real physical book as well, which is on Amazon. And so if you a lot of the topics that you'll see videos on and a lot of the topics in these ebooks, I go into more detail with them in my physical book called The Cold Calling Equation, and it's not free. It's like $15 on Amazon. One thing that's good about this book is it's printed out, right? So you can have it on your desk and use it as a reference manual. There's a chapter on gatekeepers. There's a chapter on objections. So you don't have to read it from beginning to end. You can flip to the chapter that you need help with. Once you get through all that, if you still want to move forward, check out SalesScripter. There's a free 30-day trial, so you can check it out for free. And we do provide coaching, consulting, training if you're interested. So if you like any of what I talked about, you want help to build out some processes for your company or for yourself, build out your script, whatnot, definitely reach out to us. That's all I got. So now I will open it up for questions.